So let's start by discussing why Chapter 1 should be considered your #1 priority. Now, the most obvious reason why Chapter 1 is so important is that it represents your entire book. It really is a reader's first introduction to your style, your theme, your tone, your characters, and your world. And I could go on and on with other examples. With your first chapter, you want to immediately hook your reader and keep them turning the pages. This could mean starting your story with a certain thematic tone or jumping into the middle of a scene full of dramatic tension. Whatever it is you decide to do, the beginning of your manuscript needs to be a natural introduction to the story that you've written. Readers want your first chapter to emulate the story you've created in the rest of the pages. So your first chapter should have its own highs and lows, its own conflict, and of course, it should introduce a character or two. Now, your first chapter doesn't need to have a conclusion, like the end of your complete story, but it should end in a way that pushes the reader into the second chapter, and we'll talk about that a little more later on. Like I've said, I've read thousands of first pages, and your first chapter gives away so many things. It can tell the reader about your mastery of dialogue, the uniqueness of the setting, the pacing of the novel, the strength of your characters, and your personal voice. So essentially, your talent as a writer just shines through in your first chapter. So there's a lot depending on writing a great opening for your manuscript. Now, the other reason Chapter 1 is so important is actually a personal one. The first chapter of your novel is going to haunt you forever. Think about it this way. You've written your first chapter already. Maybe. If you haven't yet, pretend that you have. You've spent lots of time, you have your first chapter. Maybe you've even revised it a few hundred times. You finally like it enough to send it out to literary agents. And then an agent reads it and loves it. And then you send it over to an editor who will eventually read it and love it. And when your manuscript finally has a home at a publishing house, the publicity and marketing team wants to share the first chapter as an early excerpt from your book. Then, when your book is actually published, potential readers and bookstores will flip to the first page of your first chapter to test whether they want to purchase and read the entire story. So are you happy with your first chapter the way it is now? Are you okay with it being shared countless times? Is it an accurate portrayal of your writing skills? And is it the absolute best way to start your story? Thinking now about how your first chapter will make its way through the publishing process will keep you motivated to create the best opening pages possible. Your Chapter 1 is the key ingredient to attracting readers, no matter which stage of the publishing process that you're at.